Shalom. I'm Brother Yishak sharing with you another Scripture Nugget. Today's Scripture Nugget we call Paths of Zsadek. Paths of Zsadek or Zedekah. It's based upon Tehillim, Psalms 23, Tehillim 23. And it says, Yah is my shepherd, I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He turns back my being. He leads me in paths of righteousness or Zedekah for his Shem or his name's sake. When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread before me a table in the face of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Only Tov and loving commitment followed me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of Yah to the length of days. Now let's take a closer look at this and see what the Most High is speaking to us regarding Tehillim 23. It begins by saying, Yah is my shepherd, I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. I call this section here the responsibility of my shepherd or my Ro'ah, because that's what a shepherd is. He is our Ro'ah. He's our shepherd. And what a shepherd does is he watches over us. That's his responsibility. And the way this psalm is phrased, this Tehillim is phrased giving the shepherd the head or the lead. It starts off with the subject of the shepherd, what a shepherd does. Yah is my shepherd, I do not lack. He watches over me. That's the responsibility of a shepherd, is to watch over us. Why? Because the shepherd knows what's best for the sheep. He knows what's best for the sheep based upon having personal intimacy with the sheep. Knowing when a sheep is thirsty, knowing when it's time for the sheep to lie down. So this is the responsibility of a shepherd. Now let's look at this even closer. In the Hebrew, green pastures, we're going to look at the word pastures. Green pastures has the Hebrew word of na'ah deshe. Na'ah deshe. The Hebrew number is 4999, which means a home, a pasture. And I have highlighted here the word habitation. And we're going to come back and visit this word habitation. It also says a house, a pasture, a pleasant place. That has a root number of H4998, which means to be at home. I have that highlighted. At home. 4999 is habitation. 4998 is to be at home. So this is just not a normal green pasture. This is a place where we will reside. Now he says green, sprout, Hebrew number 1877, a tender sprout, not something that is very coarse, but something that which a sheep can easily not only chew but digest. It's a green sprout, very tender. He leads me beside still waters. Now let's look at the word still. It is the Hebrew min u ka. Min u ka. it has the Hebrew number H4496, which is repose, shalom, consolation. But I love this other word that we have highlighted here. It is matrimony, and we'll touch on that as well. Then it also has the root number H4495, which is rest, and that has a root number H4494, which is quiet. It's a place of settled or settledness. Now, let's look at rest. It also has the Hebrew number H5117 as nuak, which means to rest. Again, to settle down. So it's just not any waters. It is a place where matrimony takes place. It's very quiet, a restful place. Still waters, not only green pastures, but still mean uka waters. Waters is mahim, Hebrew number 4325. Then look what we have highlighted here. Figuratively, it is juice, and a euphemism is urine and semen. Remember, we're talking about habitation, and we're talking about matrimony. So there is a place in which the shepherd leads the sheep to where the intimacy takes place. Okay? Now, let's continue. And Psalms 23, Tehillim 23, verse 3, he says, he turns back my being. He leads me in paths of righteousness, or Zsadek, for his Shem, or his name's sake. Now that word, he turns back, or he leads me, or he restored my soul, I think that's in another translation. It comes from the Hebrew number 7725, which means to turn back, or shub. Shub. He turns back. Now let's continue with this primitive root definition. Literally or figuratively, not necessarily from the idea of return to the starting point, but generally to retreat. Often adverbially, it says again. There's a cyclic or a cyclic pattern, if I can say that, that causes a shubing in which the shepherd turns you back. Where does he turn you back to? It says paths of righteousness, or Zsadek. Now let's continue and let's break it down just a little bit more. The word paths here in verse 3 is magala. Magala. Okay. It has a Hebrew number 4570, which is a track. Look also what we have highlighted here. It says a rampart, as in circular. It is a well-beaten path, a path that is well-traveled, or a path that is well-known, well-used. Now, magula has the root word agol, which is H5696 from the Hebrew concordance, and it is revolve or circular, round. And when something is round or circular, there's a continuance. There's a continuance. It's not necessarily a start over again, but it's a continuance. It's a continuance. Now let's look at and find out what are we, or what is the shepherd leading us to continue in. Remember, it says he leads me in paths of righteousness, or Zsadek. Okay? Now, let's look at the word righteousness, or Zsadek, or Zedekah. So paths of righteousness would be Zsadek ma Gala. Okay? The Hebrew word or number for that is 6664, which is the right path, the right way, the just way, a way of prosperity. That has a Hebrew root word or root number of 6663, Zsadek, which is also, again, the right. In the sense of moral and forensic sense, it's cleanse or clear safe or clear self, righteousness. Okay, so when he leads me in paths of righteousness, Zsadek Magla, it is for his name's sake. He does not lead me to a path just for instance, or just for whatever reason. No, it is for his name's sake. Now, let's continue. For his name's sake, sake or purpose. If we use the word purpose, it has the Hebrew number 4616, ma'an, or mahan. Properly to heed, Hebrew 6030. That is purpose, on account of. The root of that is ana, properly to eye. Yah watches over not only his Torah to perform it, but he makes sure that the sheep is led to paths of righteousness, or Zsadek or Tzadikah, because of his name's sake, for his purpose. For his purpose. You can tell a good shepherd or a tov shepherd will do what is right. They will become known as knowing how to lead sheep. Knowing how to lead. His name, Shin, Hebrew 8034. Also rooted and connected to Hebrew H7760 and H8064. It's a mark, a memorial or of individuality, his honor, his authority, his character. Now, what are these paths? We know that as a shepherd, and I don't believe this was just written just to say we have a psalm or Tehillim in which we can just quote. No, he is speaking and telling us something here. What are the circular, what are the round or a well-beaten path of righteousness of Zsadek does the shepherd leads us to? It is his appointed times, his mo'adim. Look at Leviticus 23. And Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, the appointed times, the moed, times of Yah, which ye are to proclaim as set apart gatherings, my appointed times are these. Now, I get excited about this because this speaks volume. It speaks moed, appointed times, it's fixed, it's appointed. In other words, these things never change. They never change. Hebrew 4150, moed, appointment, fixed times. His times, fixed times, appointed times, has a Hebrew number 3259 of Ya'ad. It's fixed. It's fixed. There are specific times in which you're to be at a certain point. Just like a shepherd. When a shepherd is sent out, a shepherd takes the sheep not into uncharted territory, but a well-beaten track, circular, round path. He leads the sheep, he goes off, or rather he leads the sheep, leaves the family, and goes to a well-beaten path. There's a territory in which he leads the sheep. By this month, by this time, the sheep and the shepherd should be at a certain point. At that time, that's when the green pastures, tender growth of grass is growing. It is there that they dwell. That's their habitation. The next month, or the month after, they travel again in a circular motion back to or to the next point, Moed, meeting times, the next green pasture, because at that time, at that month, that particular pasture is growing tender green grass. And so that continues. After a month or two of feeding and habitating at that place, the shepherd leads them to the next place. So the father, let's use David as an example, David as an example. His father Jesse or Yeshai would send David off with the sheep. He would not just leave and just go to the back of the farm or whatever and feed the sheep. No, he takes the sheep and he takes them on a journey. And Yeshai knows where David should be at this time, at this year, this month, or during this week. They should be in a particular spot. So if Yeshai wanted to visit David, he could take that journey knowing at this time, at this month, David would be in this location. That's what we're talking about, a fixed time to meet. Okay? And so a shepherd does that and continue to do that until it's time to bring the sheep back to put them in for the winter. Now, what are his appointed times? Again, we're talking about the responsibility of a Ro'ai or a shepherd. We're talking about how he is our shepherd, the Most High is, and that he would lead us into green pastures. Not just green pastures, but paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So he is proclaiming his appointed times, a circular, a round appointment. It's not that we're starting over. No, it's circular. We continue. Now, according to Leviticus 23, his appointed times are the Shabbat, which is the seventh Yom, as a rest. In the 14th Yom of the first month, at evening, is Pesach. Some say Passover, and also unleavened bread of matzah. Then there's the feast of first fruits, HaBikurim, at harvest time, Rashid. Then after 7 Sabbath weeks, there's the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot. Christians call this Pentecost, but it's Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, because you're counting the Omer. Then you have the Feast of Yom Teruah, or trumpets, which is in the 7th new month, on the first day of that month. Then you have Atonement, or Yom Kippur, which is the 10th Yom of that 7th month. Then you have the Feast of Sukkot, or Booths, or some in Christianity calls it Tabernacle. But it is the 15th Yom of the 7th month. These are his appointed times. This is the circular path for his name's sake that he leads the sheep on. It's more than just a confession when one says that he is my shepherd and I shall not know. It's more than that. He is leading you into a path or paths of righteousness. That word paths is plural. And let's look at this again. Yah is my shepherd. I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He turns back my being. When my being become weary, he turns it back. He brings a shubing. Now, where is he shubing me back to? Paths of righteousness in verse 3. For his Shem's sake. So when someone err or miss the mark and doesn't live up to the Torah, Yah brings them or shooves them back and put them back on the path. And when he puts them back on the path, that path is always a path of righteousness, which equates to his moed, his appointed times. Leviticus 23. So therefore, because I am walking in the circular path of righteousness, the moed, I then can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I then can fear no evil, because it is in the paths of righteousness that I find out that Yah is with me. And as long as Yah is with me, he has his rod and he has his staff. And as long as the shepherd's rod and staff is present, and I see that, it gives me comfort. It says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread before me a table. Why? Because I am walking in righteousness. I'm in the path of righteousness. That spread is before me a table. It's even in the presence of my enemies. I can sit there and rest knowing that my shepherd has his rod, my shepherd has his staff. So though there may be a wolf, though there may be the enemy looking right at us, but we see the rod and the staff of the shepherd. It is his responsibility that when that wolf attacks, the rod and the staff of the shepherd gives me comfort. He's not going to let the wolf attack me. So therefore, while I'm eating, in the face of my enemies, I can have shalom. I can have comfort. Then he says, you have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. These are the things a shepherd is doing to the sheep. And the sheep makes the confession that his cup runs over. Only told and loving commitment follow me all the days or yom or yameen of my life. And I would dwell in the house of Yah to the length of days. Why? Because Yah is my shepherd, and I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. Shalom, shalom. See you next time on Scripture Nuggets.